What actor or actress stupidly left a movie franchise or TV series thinking they were too good for it, only to be never popular again? Story 1. George Lazenby has to be the top answer. Dude with zero acting experience lands the role of James Bond after Sean Connery, and was offered a multi-film deal to be Bond for the foreseeable future. Then, his agent just totally misguides him, telling him both that it's the summer of love and nobody is going to keep wanting to see spy movies about killing people, but also that since he'd already appeared in a film, he could ask for whatever he wanted, and they couldn't turn him down. They brought Connery back for a film instead, and Lazenby's acting career basically ended on the spot. Story 2. My ex-girlfriend was on a soap but as a regular extra. They were starting to give her speaking roles, got her SAG card, etc. Once she got her SAG, she demanded more speaking roles or she was leaving. She never got another role after that. I live in LA and have a lot of actor friends, and you see this a lot. So many new actors think, okay, I got my SAG card, I've made it, time to start looking for my big breakout role. In reality, getting SAG eligibility is literally the first step in becoming a professional actor. It takes years of hard work just to get that far sometimes, and so people think it's going to be career-changing when it happens. In reality, that's just the very start of becoming a successful working actor, let alone becoming a famous actor. Because there are thousands of working actors who make a good living in film and television who no one has ever heard of. Commercial actors, soap actors, reality TV actors, all kinds of roles where you're not going to be famous, but you'll make a paycheck that lets you pay rent and work in the industry. Once you get SAG eligibility, you still will probably need several years of cutting your teeth working whatever jobs you can get. Shitty sitcoms, reality TV spots, soap opera work, etc. Anything that can get you a paycheck and a credit should be something you prioritize. So many actors don't realize what an uphill battle it is making it in that industry even after you've gotten union status and you're allowed to be hired for speaking roles. That's literally step 1 on like a 50-step journey. Just because it takes you years and years to get to step 1 doesn't mean it's not still step 1. Story 3. Marcus Chong was Tank in The Matrix, main character in a huge franchise. He had all of these big ideas about how the movie should be done and how his character should progress. That's fine, but he wouldn't stop pushing them on the directors and producers. When it came time to make Matrix 2, he was not invited back. Dude could have literally just shut up, been cool and thankful, and made huge bank and a bigger career. Story 4. I know people are going to disagree with me because they still love him, but Howard Stern, you could tell he thought his show was going to be the radio equivalent of must-see TV and single-handedly make satellite radio a viable format. I think he foresaw a similar phenomena to TV shows like The Sopranos that made it almost mandatory for most folks to subscribe to HBO. But what he failed to realize is people will still do appointment viewing, but not appointment listening. So all he did was take a small devoted fan base with him and effectively remove himself from the wider zeitgeist. It's one thing when you passively turn him on during your commute. It's another when you consciously have to pay for a subscription, no less invest in a new receiver. Overnight, he was no longer a topic of water cooler conversation and had removed the envelope he pushed that made him controversial and infamous. Story 5. Leo DiCaprio almost missed out on Titanic because he didn't read for parts. James Cameron said something along the lines of, "Okay, thanks for coming in." Leo responded along the lines of, "Wait, if I don't read, I don't get the part." And Cameron explained he'd be working on the film in post for several years after Leo was done filming, and he wasn't going to take the risk of casting the wrong person just because he was popular. Not quite your question, but I found it interesting. Leo's career could have been derailed if he didn't immediately humble himself to a screen chemistry read with Kate. Story 6. Bob's Burgers as well. If I recall correctly, the first season was animated in Flash. After that, they went to Toon Boom and have stayed that way ever since. I remember in the early 2000s, Matt Stone and Trey Parker said in an interview that South Park was made in Maya, which absolutely blew everyone's minds at the time. For context, Maya was a super powerful computer animation tool. It might still be, I haven't checked on it yet, and it was used for most, if not all, computer animated movies at the time. The other big movie of the time animated in Maya was Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within, which was considered to be a massive technical achievement due to how realistic everything looked. Again, tech has gotten much better since. To compare South Park to the Final Fantasy movie and say both were made from the same materials would be like telling someone you used a sledgehammer to put a nail into a wall. Of course, once South Park's secret was explained, the comparison was more apt. South Park's secret was that the audience was always looking at a 3D image, but it was rendered in such a way that it looked 2D. Story 7. Not exactly the same as your question, but Sean Connery turned down the role of Gandalf for $30 plus 15% of profits, which would have got him about $450. He said he didn't understand the script. So next time he was offered a script he didn't understand, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, he took it, ended up so disappointed in the product that he retired from acting. Story 8. To be fair to some of the performers who left TV series, the 1-hour format is possibly the most grueling shooting schedule in Hollywood. The leads are often filming 7 days a week with both night and day shots for almost half the year. If production is not in your backyard, you have to fly and essentially live somewhere else on the few days you get off. Starting or raising a family is difficult, and personal relationships can suffer. If you've already made enough money that you and your family will be taken care of for the rest of your life, why hurt everything for more money? Story 9. This kind of happened to Topher Grace from that 70s show. He left to be in Spider-Man 3, and I don't think he was what was wrong with the movie. He's popped up here and there and has steady work, but he definitely didn't launch into stardom. That being said, that latter seasons of that 70s show were just plain bad. And he looks almost identical to the way he looked 20 years ago now that he's in that 90s show. Dude seems to have made out just fine. I read an interview with him, and his logic made sense. He said basically that he got so lucky with that 70s show, and the show made him so much money not just in acting salary, but also syndication royalties, that he had the freedom to basically just do what he wanted as far as acting goes, which seems like an incredibly healthy mindset. Dude is clearly set for life, doesn't ever need to work again, so he can be picky and choose projects that he likes or feels passionate about, without having to hustle and grind and do projects he hates just for the money. Story 10. I nominate Harrison Ford as the opposite. He hated Star Wars and the character of Han Solo. Thought it was all pop fantasy junk, which to be fair, it kinda is. But it made him very rich and kept him famous. So he put on the vest and got back into the pilot seat despite strongly disliking the franchise and his character. He even consented to come back for the sequel trilogy despite his age and the fact that he could never spend the money, simply because Star Wars was so big it kept his name in headlines. Story 11. Of course, the most famous. Leonard Nimoy originally requested that Spock be killed off during Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, as he was tired of playing an unemotional, inhuman character. He even wrote a book explicitly called I Am Not Spock. But as they were filming the scene before he goes into the reactor, he asked the director if he could do the remember bit on McCoy as a trapdoor out, just in case. Wrath of Khan made millions, and Leonard Nimoy stepped into the directors and wrote and directed the sequel, The Search for Spock, where his character graciously returns. Years later, he wrote a book called I Am Spock, and acknowledged the fame and impact he has had on society. He did a few other roles in his later life. Edit. So, the remember thing was written into the script, and not something thought of day of. Bennett used it as a twist, and something to lire Nimoy back. Story 12. I feel like this applies a bit, but mostly I am still salty over it. As I understand it, the CW had 2 shows for renewal, and only one could survive. Gilmore Girls and Veronica Mars. Veronica Mars got cancelled, Gilmore Girls got picked up. Then, shortly after, Alexis Bledel decided she was done and quit Gilmore Girls, so it got cancelled anyway. Veronica Mars died so Alexis Bledel could go and have a forgettable movie career. This one got me curious, and I had to look it up. Looks like the CW crapped the bed all the way around. Whatever money issues they were experiencing as a network caused the downfall. The CW asked the GG showrunners/writers to take much less, and they refused, so they were let go after S6. Then they asked the actresses who played Lorelai and Rory to also take less, and they also refused. So they had new writers with no direction come up with an ending, which looked rushed and out of place for the show, and the characters' entire series developed personalities. Then, Netflix asked the original showrunners to write their original ending and do a revival single season. Those showrunners who admitted they didn't watch the final season implemented their original ending onto Rory and Lorelai, except they had been aged a decade at that point. So it looked like Rory had flamed out from her high aspirations and Lorelai got her happy ending delayed a decade. But it also overlapped with some unwelcome storylines from S7 that had cracked Rory's perfect mold and made her out to be kind of a shitty person who would be forgiven if she'd made those mistakes her senior year of college and not at age 32. Story 13. They did. I saw a podcast where one of the early producers talked about this. At one point, Tolkien had actually wanted Lee to play Gandalf if the live-action production ever happened. By the time they did it, though, Lee had some pretty serious back issues and issues with his feet. Gandalf was a pretty physical role. He noted, though, that Lee knew the source material inside and out. He had intended to play that part. Ian McKellen also had wanted this part for some time. He'd read the books repetitively for years. Lee actually has a somewhat frightening presence. McKellen is a warm, fun guy. The two combined would team up on the production staff and fight about what was in and what was not in the actual story. Lee and McKellen weren't there to do a fantasy movie. They both considered the LOTR as a British cultural treasure and wanted it treated as such. Being who they were, they basically forced everyone else through sheer willpower to make an even better movie. Both were fantastic, and the movie did radically alter Saruman in ways I haven't always liked. Lee sold every second of screen time, though. Today I can't even imagine anyone else playing Saruman. On rereads I hear Lee's voice in my head. Story 14. Not actors, the D&D, the writers and producers of Game of Thrones, got a contract to do Star Wars once Game of Thrones had finished. Rather than concluding the show in the 3 seasons the contractually had to do, they decided to wrap it up in one and go do Star Wars. D&D's career, along with the cultural significance of Game of Thrones, just disappeared overnight. The Star Wars contract got yoinked, and I don't think they've done anything since. Story 15. Nina Dobrev. She left the show The Vampire Diaries after 6 seasons. She said, "I always felt like it should be a 6-seasons adventure, when she knew it was supposed to go for 13 seasons. It got 2 more seasons. She briefly appears in the finale, and that's it. After she acted in some meh unknown stuff LOL. She is a climate activist, but then recently she went partying in Antarctica with a helicopter and Jared Leto, which caused her to lose a shit ton of credibility and fans. TVD was a really popular show. The actors could have been really big stars if it continued fully. The actors are quite big RN, but they could have been even more.